This is a very traditional period piece, and I usually like those. I also like Saoirse Ronan and Margot Robbie, so this looked very promising. And turns out the cinematography is great, and the costume design is great too. So we're off to a good start. Unfortunately, that didn't last very long. But first, what's the movie even about? It's about Mary, the young Queen of Scotland, and kinda also about Elizabeth, the Queen of England, and their relationship to each other. They're cousins, but there's a bit of a power struggle going on. Neither of them really knows how to handle the other one. And all the plotting and conspiring behind the scenes doesn't help, because both queens are surrounded by a bunch of men, with their own plans and agendas. So just staying in power is a constant balancing act. And that's sort of the interesting part of the movie, what actually kept me engaged. And it did keep me engaged for the most part. I was never bored with it. But it also didn't really deliver much more than that. It ended up just being kinda okay. It looks good and all that, the technical aspects are very solid, but the writing just wasn't that amazing. It felt very cookie cutter, to be honest. There was absolutely no edge to it whatsoever, which is interesting considering the guy who wrote this also wrote Ides of March, which I really liked. So it's okay, very watchable, but not much more than that. However, there's also a glaring issue with this movie, one that pretty much overshadows everything else. It's something that's easy to dismiss as being trivial, but it really isn't. And unfortunately I feel like I have to tread very carefully here, because people will undoubtedly want to misconstrue what I'm saying. And what I'm talking about is the issue of the casting. This movie has a very diverse cast. Ethnically speaking. There are a lot of people in this who aren't Caucasian, which on the surface shouldn't be an issue and should maybe even be applauded. However, this is a period piece set in 16th century Britain, and the truth of the matter is that wasn't a very ethnically diverse time or place. The vast majority of people, especially in the Queen's court, were white. That's an indisputable historical fact. And as far as I can tell, Bess of Hardwick wasn't Asian. So why is she Asian in this film? Because of forced diversity. Diversity in casting over everything else, including common sense and historical accuracy. Now let me just make this very clear. I have no issues casting other ethnicities than Caucasians in film. None whatsoever, as long as it makes sense in the context of the story. Set a movie in 16th century Asia and cast all Asians? That makes sense. Set it in modern day London and have a diverse cast? That also makes sense. Set it in a fantasy universe with no white people at all. No problem. I'll watch those movies, and if they're good, I'll praise them. But if you make a historical drama, set in the Queen's court of 16th century Britain, you need to have an almost exclusively white cast. Because that's just the way it was back then. That part of the world was almost entirely white. And depicting it in any other way is just plain make-believe. It doesn't reflect reality. But not only that, it also calls into question what other historical facts you willfully ignored or distorted. I can't trust you to be accurate. So as a little experiment, let's just flip the script here, just to highlight the absurdity of the situation, in case you think this isn't an issue. Let's put out a casting call for a Martin Luther King biopic. You can probably see where this is going. And you're right, it doesn't make a lick of sense. Because we're gonna cast a white guy as Martin Luther King. Because ethnicity doesn't matter, right? And being historically accurate doesn't either. That's essentially what you're arguing, if you think the diversity of the cast in this movie makes any sense whatsoever. But everyone should have equal opportunity, and we shouldn't discriminate, right? Well, wrong. Brad Pitt can't play Rosa Parks, and Lucy Liu can't play Lincoln. And if you want more diversity in film, I'm all for it. But you're going about it the wrong way. The way to deal with that is not to force diversity into situations where it doesn't make sense. It's to make movies where a diverse cast fits the context, a la Crazy Rich Asians. Why? Because a white Martin Luther King doesn't make any sense. That's why. Nor does the casting in this movie. But would I recommend this thing? Not really. It's just whatever. Probably skip it. Or don't. I'm not your dad, but I am trying to sell out, so consider liking, subbing, hitting that bell and supporting me on Patreon. Because I really need that castle in Scotland. And hey, why not drop a comment below or check out another review? I'd appreciate it. Thanks.